All right, we're going to go ahead and get started for our May user group. So as usual, in case you guys are wondering why we're holding a microphone in the front, we have our web audience on to listen in. So we do the live audience as well as a web simulcast. So thanks to everybody on the web joining as well as in the room. It's been a couple months since we've actually had a user group in the office. We've had the last two on the web with various reasons. We couldn't. Yeah, matter of fact, I did one of them from my sofa, and the other one last week we had a training class last month. But so we're back together again. So today's topic is high performance HMI and FactoryTalk View SE version 11. So it's kind of interesting because we've been doing the user group like this now for quite some time since I came on board here. And we have actually never did a View SE topic to date. So today we will finally do it. Version 11 came out not too long ago. And so we have some great updates, which Luis will present for us in a few minutes. But as always, we do some our introductions, kind of future dates. So from the offset, this doesn't look too good. We don't have anything really defined going past next month. But we do have some topics in development, and absolutely we'll fill these up very soon. We try not to go too far in advance because we like to try to, see what's the trends and what people, kind of what's new and exciting. So sometimes we'll leave things open. But next month we'll be back in this room, and we'll have the guys from Stratus who make the fault tolerant servers they'll will be here in New Orleans, and they'll be showing off their little edge computing, the ZTC edge server, which is a really nice product. So it's a smaller edge device, but it's a server able to run 4 or 5 virtual images on it. And it's a redundant server at that. So they'll have that on display. And then going into the summer and into the fall, there's some new stuff out that we'd like to talk about. The new Logix AI embedded analytics module. I think that's definitely one we'll get in there. There's a new update to the device level ring for networking, a phase 2 for DLR. I think that's a great topic. We'll maybe try to put together. And then ProSoft is also planning to come in town. We don't quite know yet. So as always, we're open to suggestions. Please give us some ideas if you'd like to hear something special that we don't cover. And then the other thing we always plug away is some other big events. So locally in June, and we have some dates on it now. So June 18th through the 27th, that's about a 2-week period at the end of June. We will have the Rockwell, what they call the Rockwell Automation on Tour. And what that is we get about 3 pallets of cases, demo cases, and we set them up in this room. And it's a chance for you guys to come in here and just work on the labs on your own time. So it's about 2 hours of lab. A lot of the labs are the same ones that you do if you went to Tech Ed or if you went to Automation Fair, but not all the labs. There's a lot of labs at Tech Ed, of course. They range from networking and security to controllers, drives, operator interface, HMI, including the View SE that we're going to talk about today, and Plant PAX. But there is one new one to note that's on the agenda this year, and that's a scalable compute hands-on experience. So Rockwell released a in-chassis compute module, basically a onboard computer for ControlLogix. So there's a lab based around that that new product. So that's going to be a pretty good one. Of course, June is Tech Ed. We have at least one person going to Tech Ed in this room, so that's great. Well, 2 people actually, technically. And then so Tech Ed's in Orlando coming up quick, and Automation Fair in Chicago in November. So one thing we want to plug before we forget at the end of the day is Rockwell, and we talked about this before, but just a reminder, Rockwell Automation has a what they call the cloud-based infrastructure, or RACBI in their acronym terms. And those are basically the same kind of labs, kind of like we'll see coming in June, but we can run them off of a cloud. So we can actually set up an instance, give you a link. You don't have to travel anywhere. You could sit at your desk, at your home, wherever, run through the labs at your own pace, at your own time. And since today's topic is View SE, there are several View SE labs available. So one's kind of an introduction lab. There's one I think that goes more into architecting a View SE system, which is actually a pretty good one. So if you are interested, after Luis talks about View SE, let us know and we can set up a lab for you. Now, our guest presenters today, we always put the pictures, as usually we're remote, but Luis is live in the room with Solution Architect at Rockwell Automation. And well, Dean Bickerton, who is not here today, was going to present on the HMI, on the ISA piece of the HMI. So he decided to find something more exciting to do than talk. No, he, as always, as you guys know in this job, duty calls, right? So got to take care of business always. So I will sub for Dean as best as I can. By the way, Dean, in addition to being an account manager with Rockwell, he's also, with the Reynolds company, he is the president of the local ISA chapter. So he obviously knows the ISA stuff very well. So ISA 101. So the idea of today was, so first off, we want to introduce VUSC version 11, talk about, what's come about in the software, kind of update everybody on that. But Dean did 2 presentations for ISA in the last couple of years around ISA 101, which are very informative. So we kind of figured there's a little bit of a tie-in here between VUSC version 11 and the new ISA 101 standard. So we wanted to just take a minute to kind of introduce what that is in case you're not familiar with it, and then that will kind of roll into the VUSC piece. So, the whole idea, the background of ISA 101 is, operator interfaces have changed over the years, right? So, back in the day, you had giant bench boards, tons of metering, mimic buses perhaps, right? Good old mimic buses and switches all tied into the distribution lines. And of course, over time, HMIs came out and started to replace these things. And in the early days, or maybe still today, a lot of practices was just whatever's on that mimic board, let's just copy that and put that on the HMI screen, right? And that sounded great in the beginning because that's kind of what we were all used to seeing. But over time, that didn't really prove to be maybe the best way to do your HMI. So that led to lots of information overload, right? Ineffective displays, inappropriate use of graphics. I know everyone who is probably listening is guilty of this at one point in their lives, right? I was extremely guilty of using the Wonderware teal background color, for a very long time. The other part of that is just too much information and is, can you detect the anomaly out of this image, right? And I'll give you a little bit of a hint. The anomaly is there's a man with no shirt on in there. And if you know where he is, he's actually right there, right? So the idea of that is that a lot of information, a lot of clutter on the screen, are you going to be able to, is your operator or is the operator going to be able to make an informed decision quickly if it's too much clutter, right? So again, so this was kind of what we've seen or what's been done over the years. Say what you might look at that and say that's not that bad, right? But there's a lot of stuff, a lot of different colors. Lots of red on there, lots of alarms even on that screen. Perhaps after time, the operator just doesn't start to tune some of that stuff out, right? And then here's another classic example of way to not do things, right? So so again, back in the day, this was kind of fancy, right? We made some nice pictures and some 3D shading and some gradients. We even got the little flames kicking out, right? But really, a lot of that information on that screen isn't pertinent or relevant to the operator, to do his job.
I still stand by the fact that an animated flame on a boiler is awesome.
It did look good, right? So that, and then kind of leading up to maybe where the BP Amoco Texas City explosion in 2005 refinery. One of the things that kind of came out of that, when they went through all that was, not to say that the HMI was the cause of it, but there was a lot of alarms, perhaps not being paid attention to, a lot of clutter, a lot of fatigue from the operator were definitely factors in that. So the ISA 101 committee came about in 2006, and that was a committee. So the way how the ISA committees work, if you're not that familiar with them, is they're pretty much open to anybody. So anybody listening can join a committee. You can join as a non-voting member easily. To become a voting member might take a little bit more criteria, but you can join a committee and kind of listen in or kind of see what's happening. So the committee, ISA 101 was the standard number they gave to it is pretty much made up of a mix of end users, integrators, and vendors. So Rockwell is a participating member in the ISA 101 committee as well. So, which is good. It's about almost a third each, pretty even split between all the major stakeholders, perhaps that would be part of an HMI development. So the purpose of ISA is to address the design, implementation, maintenance of a human-machine interface, or HMI, for the process automation. And it's to give guidance, right, on how to design, build, maintain HMIs, which are more effective and efficient, right, again, for both normal and abnormal situations. Improve the user's abilities to detect and diagnose, right, find the problems quickly. Remember the guy in the sea of yoga people there. And then and kind of look at the whole HMI holistically, right, not just as the display, but more as an entire system within the plant, right? And the standard, of course, is kind of the what. And then there are technical reports that become kind of the how. How do you actually go about doing this? So this should be kind of fairly obvious to most people, but who cares about standards? I mean, I think most of us deal with standards all the time, but obviously users should be very interested in standards. Integrators, right, because you want to make sure you're kind of putting out the a system that is functional and will meet those standards. And suppliers, of course, need to know and be aware of the standards and produce, maybe provide products and upgrades to the products that will meet what the customer's expectations are. So there are 4 working groups currently underneath ISA 101, and we're going to what we're going to talk about today briefly in the next couple of slides will be this working group 2, which is the usability and performance working group. There is one on the philosophy and style guide development. There's one working towards HMI for mobile devices, kind of some standardization around that. And then there's even a 4th group about HMI for on-machine applications. So that's kind of your machine, kind of a machine-based HMI. So much more of a, not a plant-wide look, but just a machine-level look. So again, the working group 2 is really kind of, how do we go about, more the how do we, some of the guidelines of how to build the screens, performance-related stuff. So 101.02, the kind of your table of contents, and that would be, you kind of see here, we got basically scope and reference, but it's really looking at, 5 and 6, usability and performance, right? So what are your, again, having usability for the operator, and then the performance standards that might be required. All right, so just a few quick slides on what some of these, kind of what that ISA 101 style kind of looks like, right? So first off, we have a level 1 display. They kind of classify them level 1, 2, 3, and 4. So level 1's kind of that very big macro look, like a dashboard, high level dashboard of maybe the entire area or the entire plant, right? And the whole idea here is, the colors are muted, it's gray background, right? Not the teal. The colors, are only going to really pop when there's an issue, right? So a yellow might indicate a warning in this case. There's a red on the meter down there. That would be an error to look at, right? So those will be much more visible to an operator, right? Versus a giant screen. The other idea of the 101 is not so much to rely on the numbers, but to more rely on kind of the trend lines and these kind of, kind of peg lines in those curves, because quite honestly, if you just see a bunch of numbers on the screen, you don't necessarily know if that's good or bad, right? I mean, you can make the number change a color or something, but you can see here quickly that, you're in spec, right? The oven, the blue marker looks to be in the spec range across the board. So you want to kind of see that nice kind of a level across, right? So that anybody can look at that, an operator can look at that and quickly gauge the health of their facility. Taking it down to another level is layer 2 or level 2. This would be kind of would be an operator, primary operating display, right, during normal operations. So this might, kind of get down into a larger, still a larger view, but an area of the plant perhaps. So you see same kind of look and feel. We got the little slider bars, quickly kind of gauge across the top there, and we see we're in tolerance across on the process. We've got some trend lines, right? So we got, looks like the green's probably a set point where the blue is a your actual process variable and how it's trending to your set point. And then again, we showed that picture before with the little flame and all. And we've all done the cutaway tank view and the nice level fill, right? But here, this gives you more of the historical look across that tank, right? Versus an actual animated level of where you are currently. So now when we get to level 3, now we're just maybe drilling down into an individual process area. And now you start to see, maybe we get some piping, some piping diagrams. Then we start to see some of the process, true process devices out there, like, valves and pumps, the things the control devices that we would, be controlling in the process. And still kind of keeping to the color scheme of, a yellow would mean a warning, and I guess a hexagon is more of a lower grade warning, perhaps. And last would be, the most granular view would be kind of your level 4, which would be more like a faceplate, right? So if we took one of those pumps on that previous screen and we drilled into that pump to see operating conditions of that pump, then we, then we get a faceplate view, kind of following that same scheme. So that's how they kind of organize it, and that's how they kind of, so the ISA 101. Again, kind of brings you into that look and feel, and provides you some standards on how to make that that kind of template, that kind of look for your stuff. Now that's all I really want to do here. I want to let Luis kind of take it from here with the View SC. But we just want to say a couple of things about that. I'd said earlier, Dean, there's been 2 very good 1-hour presentations that are archived on the ISA New Orleans section's website. So I invite you guys, and in the show notes for this, we always put the archive up on the web. We'll put these links on there. But if you want to get a deeper dive than what we just provided there, hit up these 2 archived presentations from September 2017 and February 2019, and there'll be a much deeper dive into that topic. As well as you go up to isa.org itself and visit their ISA 101 page. We'll share all those links. All right. So with that, I'm going to switch gears. We're going to make Luis the presenter here as soon as I can. I think yep. We'll focus on View SC version 11, and we'll tie into the ISA there towards the end.
I like how Wayne now sounds like a podcast host, where it's like show notes will be included.
That was so for 2 weeks. I was in a lot of podcasts.
So I do want to keep with the ISA standard side of it, but I'm going to start off with just FactoryTalk View, some of the newer features, and then inside of that, we'll kind of delve into where we go with it. I do have a demo with the Plant PX process objects. So a majority of that is where we're doing the high performance graphics and a lot of the ISA standards. So we'll go through that. The idea here is for everybody in the room who's already played with FactoryTalk View in the past. Okay, that's out of the room. You guys segregated. I like that. So FactoryTalk View SE or Site Edition is our HMI platform for a computer-based system. So the Hmi is machine-based. That is usually tied in with the panel views, panel view plus 6, 7. When we look at SE, that would normally run on a Windows environment. It's either going to be Station, which would be an all-in-one solution. So basically your Windows 7 or Windows 10 box, and you can add as many graphics, you can tie into as many controllers as you want, and you can do also third-party communication. On the distributed side, we do more what's called a server client architecture. So at that level, we're now looking at either a single box or a redundant set of boxes with multiple clients all throughout. So kind of the control room environment that Wayne was showing, that would typically be where we would take FactoryTalk View SE. So in our HMI, we use that towards SCADA. We use that towards a full DCS package or a small little OEM SCADA. So you can kind of mix and match. So down to the VersaView level, we have that as a single little node box. One of the things that we'll be kind of showing off is the fact that we'll have, like Thin Manager is one of the big pieces that we have. So I have a Thin Manager box in the room. The demo that I'll do, I'll make it so everybody can see it. It's running on my laptop, but just on a Windows 2012 box. So some of the things that have come out since then. So we were on FactoryTalk View version 10, 11 just released within the month. So there's a lot to take in. I am not going to cover every single one of these because it would take more than an hour. But I did highlight a couple of things that we want to focus on. So the way FactoryTalk View SE works is it's able to go directly to the controllers. So any of the compact logics, controllers via the Ethernet port, we can do an automatic browse. So there's no database, there's no special coding that needs to be done. If you create a tag inside of the controller, you're able to access that data point. So no matter whether it's a timer, a Boolean, it doesn't really care. You're displaying that information, and at that point, you can dynamically assign that information to either an animation, security, a box, or you can just display the information. Typically, when we're looking at the HMI, a lot of us, including myself back in the past, we do the flaming little graphics. I like doing all of the 3D piping and the different colors for every single chemical that you can think of. Nowadays, when you start looking at the high performance graphics, you start seeing a lot of the grayscale coloring. And the idea is don't present more information to the operator than they actually need. So if colors go off, you want them to be attracted to figure out what that issue is. So some of the things that we've done and introduced inside of the new version and the new release is, the first one is pin pop-ups. So I'll show this in the demo, but a lot of the times we do full displays and then we have little pop-ups. So we'll call them either pop-ups or faceplates. The issue traditionally is you click on a pop-up and then you navigate away from that and go to another screen. Well, the pop-up goes away. Well, if you wanted that pop-up to stay, now you can go in and just pin that. So now you can navigate to multiple screens and the little pop-up will stay there. So the easy example for that is where Wayne was talking about, where you have maybe a PNID drawing, and if you're tracking a specific pressure or flow from one piece and it may not be on the same screen, well, instead of being able to kind of track that, open up, try to remember what the PV value was on that, well, now you got the little pop-up and you can just navigate to another screen and still see the flow or temperature that was looking at that. So that's one item. The other one is Trend Pro. So Trend Pro is a big thing that I'm going to be talking about. It's the same functionality that we have in Vantage Point to be able to do trending, is now been embedded directly into FactoryTalk View without the need of any type of licensing. So basically what that means is you now have a method of being able to do dynamic trending where you can go in there, drag and drop different data points. You can grab the information directly from live data. You can grab it from data logs, historian, and also OSI Pi native. So I'll talk about that. There's also some support now that we're doing for the ISA side. So it's not, generally you'll see a screen of it. It's white, it's bright, it's out there. Now on the ISA side, we've also grayscaled that so you can mute the trend so that it's not as active to look at. Talking about Thin Manager, we'll get into some of the licensing changes that we're looking at and how we're integrating into Thin Manager. The other big thing is production events. So I'll talk about this, but what traditionally you guys might be asking for is I want to be able to log all of my process data. So if my temperature is changing, I want to be able to log that over the course of a year, a couple months, whatever that might be. The other big request is I want to be able to know when somebody's pushing a button. So when an event triggers inside of my HMI, I want to be able to look at that as a log. Traditionally, unless it was a data point inside of the controller, we wouldn't be logging it because we're traditionally looking at all the logs, all the data logs, or all the historian from process variables. So anything that exists inside of the controllers. What we can do now is using alarm and events, we can trigger events and have those saved into the SQL log that was already traditionally there. So those are non-process variables that you're setting and dynamically associating to, and then I can pop that on a trend as well. And just as an FYI, anybody on the phone and for you guys in the room, feel free to ask questions. So if you got anything, let me know. Wayne is manning the phone lines. So. Oh, what did I do now? That's where I learned it. So first thing on Asset Center. So how many people know what Asset Center is? So Asset Center, really quick, is our software that we use for change management. So FactoryTalk Asset Center will sit on the server, connect to all of the controllers, the FactoryTalk View pieces, and it saves a single database with all of the configuration files. So if something changes on a control logics, Asset Center is essentially notified. You can do a comparison on that file, and then you can do an automatic upload. So now you have multiple revisions on that. You can also do an asset inventory, so it goes out through the network and tells you exactly what's there, firmware, serial numbers, all that fun stuff. One of the new updates to V9 on Asset Center is the ability of being able to go in and do a full backup of the FactoryTalk View application. So natively, I can go in, grab the FactoryTalk View application, whether it's distributed or standalone, and bring that in, and now I can tie it in, and I can do a comparison from an older version to tell you what screens have changed. I'm not going to be able to tell you if they changed the screen from blue to black, but I can at least tell you specifically this global object or this specific display was changed at this week or this time period. And I can potentially also tell you from where. So if somebody logged in, those type of things will be audited into the system. The other nice thing that Asset Center does is it's a big brother to the overall system. So as you add controllers, as you add Studio 5000 environments, if somebody's going in there and modifying anything, I'm tracking it down to the controller and I'm tracking it down to the development box. So everything that you're doing, I can see. If you're changing a rung and putting it back, I know exactly what you did. It goes down to that level of it. I can now see those logs directly into the trending environment in SE without having to add any additional interfaces. So from an operator or maintenance perspective, it's one box, one pane of glass. I have yet to find anybody that has made a system this big, and if you want to, go for it. So one of the sizing guide requirements that we've done is traditionally, back a couple years ago, we were at a limit of about 50 displays. So 50 individual systems that you can put runtime boxes for FactoryTalk View SE. It has since grown to 120. So the FactoryTalk View system itself can be 10 redundant servers, the HMI displays, the alarm and events, the data collectors. All of the alarms that we're looking at, we're sizing up to about 100,000 alarms. You're probably looking at well over 300 different controllers that you're tying into, all segregated however you want, and then up to about 120 clients. So those are individual monitors that are tied in, looking at the same data. Each one of them would be independent, all looking at the same data. You can have different operators doing different things. And then I also have the ability of increasing the size on this if I wanted to do the HTML5 graphics via viewpoint. So if you're doing anything to this size, let me know. But even if you want to just see how we would architect, Wayne mentioned earlier that we have that cloud-based system where you can do training. One of them is architecting the full SE system. So all the different components that I'll call out, it tells you exactly what the requirements are and why they're important. I talked about this on the pin pop-up, so I can go into the little block here, click on that, and now change screen. So as I navigate around, the pop-up stays. So I'll show you that in a live demo. Apparently a lot of animation in that one. So the Trend Pro, as I mentioned, so this is one of those things where most of the customers I talk to, especially those that have been using FactoryTalk View SE since like version 6, 7, 8, don't know this exists. So this is something that got introduced back in version 9. At version 9, it required a license of Vantage Point. At version 10, they got rid of that requirement. So this is something that even if you're upgrading from an older version of FactoryTalk View SE, you can now implement this without the need of any additional licensing. So every single client can now dynamically add this system in, and you can, like I said, you can bring information back and forth from the different pieces of data that you have. Live data, data logs, the alarm and events, and all the Asset Center log is going to also be on the bottom of it. So this is a really nice feature of being able to get away from the standard trending that you see in Hmi and SE. So anytime you complain about trending, I'll ask you if you're using this, and if you're not, I'll tell you to use this, and then you'll stop complaining. That's basically the way it works. The other really nice thing is now I can natively talk to OSI Pi. So for anybody that doesn't know, our FactoryTalk historian is OSI Pi based. So we have a historian ME module, which is basically what sits inside of the chassis. We have a site edition, which is server based inside of a Windows environment. So that can collect and do data logging essentially over the course of years. If your customers or you guys have an OSI Pi native to the system, then we would now be able to use just the FactoryTalk View system instead of just Vantage Point to be able to tie into that data. So no requirements for process book or anything like that. This can talk native. This is more on the development side. Most of the time we would run into issues where if you wanted to back up the application or install on a new Windows box, you would have to use what was called application code or application manager. And there was like, you had to find the little SE file and a bunch of other different pieces of it. What they've done is they've consolidated there's one tool for all site edition based FactoryTalk. So FactoryTalk ME will be renamed FactoryTalk ME Application Manager, FactoryTalk SE Application Manager. It'll be for the standalone, the local, the network, the distributed side of it. So one tool to basically do all of it. So I'll show this in a demo really quick just so you guys are able to see it. But essentially what ends up happening is if I'm doing a FactoryTalk system, what Rockwell does is we license the box, not the number of monitors. So traditionally when you install FactoryTalk View and you're doing a server client system, you would normally have some type of either Dell box like Windows 7, Windows 10, you install the software on it, and then you can add, let's say 4 monitors to it. We're licensing the box itself. So there's one FactoryTalk View SE client license that's required. All the monitors would enable to let you do whatever you want. So the 4 monitors would take place of the total number of clients that you can have for a system. So that 120 that I mentioned earlier would go against that. But the actual license is only per the box. In the thin client environment, before this, we had some commercial issues where we were creating a session for each monitor. So each monitor would then require a license from Rockwell. So you had to get with me and secretly go into a room and say, okay, I'm going to try to fix it for you. In V11, for both Thin Manager and FactoryTalk View SE, they've now corrected that issue. So essentially what that means is if I drop this thin client and I tie in 2 monitors to it, it doesn't matter what I'm putting on there, I'm licensing the box only. So that would require only 1. One of the latest boxes that we have for the thin client environment is now a 4K 3 or 7 monitor system. So it's a full control room replacement. That guy requires only 1 license on the FactoryTalk side. So that is something I'll show you kind of what we can do with it on my laptop, but just keep that in mind that this is a complete change where I can now have multiple monitors tied into one thin client box and it would only require 1 license.
As multiple sections. So is that 1 license or 2 licenses? Is it 2 sections?
It doesn't matter what sections. If it's coming from 2 distinct FactoryTalk View systems, each one would be a license. But the actual breakup, so essentially the question is, if we have one thin client with multiple sections inside of a monitor, that is still 1 license to the controller or to the actual thin client box. So I'll show you in the demo and how I can set that up. This is another one that's brand new. They actually did a patch upgrade for V10, but as of V11, it's going to be built in. So for systems, especially when you guys receive, let's say maybe OEM equipment or you're doing a plant upgrade, things of that nature, a lot of the times what you might start off with is a FactoryTalk SE station. So it's that all-in-one solution. So you had a license that can run the runtime and the application essentially on a Windows 10, Windows 7 box. And let's say you wanted to upgrade that system into a server client architecture. So I install a brand new box. I have a server client architecture, but now I have this SE station license. Originally in the past, what I would normally do is talk you into taking that license and doing some type of step forward program internally with us and say, okay, give me that license. I will give you a FactoryTalk View client license. Here's the X amount of money that it's going to take to do that. What I can do now is essentially take that existing SE station license and it will look for both. So I can use it either as a FactoryTalk client or I can use it as a station license. So I don't have to make any changes to it. You can exist on the same network. And the other really important reason why that becomes a nice use case is if I have a network connection and that a FactoryTalk View station license is in a different building, if I lose network connectivity and you have a requirement that that HMI station always have control, I can normally be using it as a client, still use my FactoryTalk SE system as my server client, but if I lose network connectivity, have it swap over as a station. You don't have a need for a different licensing strategy. You don't have to do anything special on that. It's the exact same one that was there. So now if I do lose that network connectivity, this guy will take over as a station. So this is something that's completely new on our end of it, but it'll automatically happen through the system. So if you got use cases like this or anything like that, just let me know. We can talk through it. So I talked about this, essentially the production events. So this is now a trigger that you can tie in. So when we're looking at the alarms, for anybody that doesn't know, FactoryTalk View SC has a built-in ability of being able to tie in all of the existing alarms that are part of the system into a SQL log. So essentially you can record that data into a local SQL database, whether it's on the same system or just on the network, to be able to record what system is an alarm, when you acknowledge it, when you suppress it, when you do all the shelving. So anything as part of the 18.2 ISA standard, you're able to now log that into the system. On top of that, you can now add these production events as part of the same overall system. So you can log that into it and see the logs directly onto the HMI. The other thing that I don't think I have in here is you can now also see the diagnostic list from the FactoryTalk directory in the system without the need of an asset center system if that doesn't exist. So you can now see some of those audit logs directly from the clients. So you mentioned panel views. So for anybody that is using the FactoryTalk View ME, for the panel views, one big change that happened on the 7s with the new firmware once you download it in is you now up the license count to 100 displays. So essentially on the panel view plus 7 standard, what this means is you'll have a limit of 100 displays. It used to be 50, it moved to 75. Now it's 100, it's 50 full displays, 50 pop-ups. So for anybody that's using the process objects, essentially all those little faceplates that you would pop up, still require a license count on there. So with the new licensing structure that you're looking at V11, once you're looking at the panel view and it's a panel view 7 standard, at that level you can now do up to 50 displays. Still one controller, but you can now do 50 full displays, 50 pop-ups. For my SIs and developers, this is a long time coming. If I'm taking the backup application of a panel view and I'm trying to restore it, it will now tell you what version it was written in. This is something that most of the time you had to just kind of pick and choose and figure it out. So this is a nice little, hey, it's about time. I know. So jumping back into a little bit of the ISA side of it. So one of the big changes that we've done is internally, part of it is part of our process Plant PX kind of system that we're kind of rolling into the rest of the equipment. But we're also now looking at the existing kind of library set that we had inside of FactoryTalk View ME and SC. So most of the time, if you guys ever created a brand new system, it'll automatically ask you, do you want to add these screens into your system? And they were all what you would see on the left-hand side. So this was the existing PIDE. Those have now been moved over to what we're doing on the ISA graphics. So I'll show you in a demo what this looks like natively. but we're doing a lot more of the grayscale side of it so that you can see and actually push everything towards that grayscale ISA standard. And that's, so time to play with the demo.
Question for you, but application manager,
as far FactoryTalk View SC, the application manager, yes. So the newer tool will be able to utilize. The issue that you're going to run into is it's always going to ask to upgrade the SC system. So for everybody on the phone and for you guys here, FactoryTalk ME, traditionally you would just install to the latest and greatest version, and then when you develop an application, you can push it down to whatever panel view you wanted, and it would give you a drop down to, okay, I'm currently on version 11, but my panel view was written back when it was 9. It has version 9 firmware on it, so I'm going to create my application runtime in version 9. And I had a little checkbox that says, okay, I want to convert it. I want to make it so that it's converted so that when somebody goes and takes a backup of it, I don't need the full application set. I take that file and I can bring it back onto my laptop. In the SE environment, what ends up happening is very similar to the way Studio 5000 works. That version that's installed is the master version. So once you move over to V11, what you can do is you can take older versions that were written in V10, V9, and bring them up and open them up in the new application. They'll automatically convert everything. But the moment that you want to try to take that V11 application, move it down to a V9, the world will end and your laptop will explode. So just be aware that essentially everything that's going to happen is just like if you only had version 32 of Studio 5000, you can open up any ACD file that you had in the past, but as soon as you try to open it up, it says, I will now convert for you. Are you okay? So just be aware of that. Hopefully that answered the question online, but if not, feel free to let me know.
And one more came in as you boot that up about the new graphics contain anything that resembles a small Sparkline or short time frame trend.
Look at that.
That can be shown next to the vertical bar on the graphic.
So that becomes a nice little segue. Hopefully you guys can still see with my head in the way. So a little bit of information for people on the phone and for you guys here. So what I have going is I have essentially a Thin Manager all-in-one demo on my laptop. It's running on VMware. So it's just a Windows 2012 image. So I have FactoryTalk View version 11, Studio 5000 version 32, and then I got Emulate running in the background. So this guy right here. I have a couple different applications all loaded up. So one of them is the process library objects for the 4.0, essentially what came out with the release of Plant PX 4.5. So if you guys haven't seen that, we have a bunch of documentation that all came out as a version 31 redundancy that talks about how we handled on the process side, infrastructure guides, selection guides, reference guides, all tied into the DCS play. You can use all of that towards any type of application that you want, but all the documentation is talking about our DCS. So what I'm going to show you here is a sample application that exists inside of that library. So it's a free download. You grab it, you can load this up, and as you can tell, it does load just fine on Emulate. So V32 Emulate did just release recently. So if you guys haven't seen it, you can download it. For anybody that has a toolkit, you have the licensing. All you have to do is go to the website and download it. So I'm going to show you this, and then I also have a couple other features on here. So FactoryTalk View, this is a demo that gets installed directly with your copy of V11. It's inside of the HMI projects. It just doesn't have a drop down automatically. So you can add it into the system. There's a knowledge base article that's part of the presentation. So what I did is my presentation has a bunch of hidden slides. When we publish it to the website and we attach it to the show notes, all of that will be in there, so you guys can go to the knowledge base article. It has a how-to guide, so if you want to be able to kind of go through this. This one, I will tell you, is not the latest and greatest version that I can see of a demo, so that's why I have the other ones to kind of offset. They just did a quick little snippet of a lot of the different options that we have in the new system. The other one that you'll see is what we call the cookie demo. So for anybody that's gone to Automation Fair or Tech Ed, this thing is rampant throughout. So about 2 years ago, they started creating what was called the cookie demo on the Rockwell side. We use that demo for almost everything because it has every single piece of software that you can think of tied into it. The reason why I like this right now is because these are some of the newer graphics that they're doing as far as diagnostics into the controller. I'm getting all of this information even through Emulate. So this is a lot of the LCPU, the task monitor type tools. All of this is tied in. And realistically, assuming that my Emulate controller wasn't messed up here. Come on. There we go. Yeah, that was kind of working. And then the other piece, just briefly to look at, is I said this was the all-in-one demo for Thin Manager. So what you guys are seeing on the screen is a virtualized thin client. So I'm running this on VMware. It's essentially a little Linux box. So this representation would be the equivalent of one of those boxes that I have loaded up with 5 different displays tied into it. From a Rockwell point of view, again, that would be one license. And essentially the way I have this guy broken up is these 4 quadrants, the main screen and the 3 screens here are full screens. So if this was a 4K type image, I can now fit 4 full HD graphic displays and interface with them directly. So normally through Thin Manager, what we had in the past is you would set up all your quadrants, and as soon as you click on one, it takes the full screen. You do your work, and then you can go back to tiling it. This is now called virtual screening. So what you can do is actually set it up so that you pixelate and say, okay, this quadrant here will always be this monitor. And I can freely move information back and forth. And again, it requires one license. So it could be coming from the SE environment. It can be coming from Historian, Reports, Vantage Point, Excel, you name it. Every piece of data source that you can call from. It could also be the full Windows environment. Normally, you just do the application. Let me run through a couple of things in the demo. Looks like we still got some time to kind of play in here. So for anyone that is new to FactoryTalk View Studio or this environment, essentially this is the development platform that we're looking at. So the license that you have for FactoryTalk and what I was playing with right now is the runtime portion. So we usually call that FactoryTalk View Client. From a development point of view, we would run what's called FactoryTalk View Studio. So you can buy that in 2 flavors. It's either Studio Enterprise, which has both Site Edition and ME, Machine Edition, or you usually just buy the FactoryTalk View ME Studio, which is what lets you do the panel view configuration. So again, for anybody that has a toolkit, you guys have access to this already directly. You just have to install it. What I have on this one, this is the process library object test one. So inside of this, you would see a display. So that display will have, in this case, it's a lot of global objects. The idea is every single one of these objects that are on the screen are tied in and called out in one location. So I can now go in there, and if I wanted to edit the base object, I can go in, do a modification to this, and it'll propagate against the entire system any little change that I want. And then each individual data point, I can now say, okay, I want it to pass this specific value. So the idea here is when I'm looking at this pump or this drive, when I click on it, I'm launching the specific information for that one drive or that one motor. If I click on another one, if I have 10 instances and it's motor 101, 102, 103, 104, it's the exact same screen. All I'm doing is data passing information on it. So you see this is very, very grayscale. So my running joke is we've now gone even grayer than we did before. So this is the 4th iteration of our process library objects. So they came out about August of last year. So we will see a small update to this come out at the end of May. So the process library objects will be 4.1 at that point. They're adding a few other library objects. But what this gets you is you'll see analog inputs, drives, an E300 is also part of this. Different motors, the valve configuration, so whether it's a solenoid valve, a motorized valve, hand open, your PID. So similar to what I had shown on the display, this is now showing you your PV level, SV, all the different configuration pieces, whether it's an operator mode, whether it's an automatic, so program mode state, and also if you wanted to be able to override all of these things. So to start off with, let me kind of jump into this guy just to show you some of the different feature sets that we're doing. So this is the FactoryTalk View demo that I was talking about that's already included inside of FactoryTalk View SE. The Trend Pro screen. So this is kind of the look and feel. What you'll see here, as I mentioned, so you have your full trend environment, you tie into it, you'll have all the different alarms and settings that you can do. The Enterprise Historian is the OSI Pi connection. What we've done now is also done like an ISA 101 standard. So this gets rid of that white background, gets rid of all the different information pieces. And now I'm just showing that. Some of the other features that I've added inside of FactoryTalk View SE is the ability of being able to dynamically assign how many decimal places I'm using inside of either a trend window, a numerical display, anything to that side of it. I'm also able to do indirect parameter passing inside of it. So you can essentially go down multiple levels in a parameter pass to be able to send information back and forth. So it's kind of like Inception, a dream inside of a dream inside of a dream. The other nice thing, one of the things that we added as of V10, if you guys aren't aware, is we did a huge update to the way that we handle redundancy. So we have in the SE server environment, we can have a redundant HMI server. And essentially what that means is I can have a primary and a secondary. So if I lose my primary, my clients will continue to run. So the operators don't see any issue. What happened in the past is you would have to take the application, copy it over from the primary, manually copy it to the secondary, and then go back to the primary and hit a button to say synchronize. And then if you ever did anything where you were writing to the secondary, it would get overwritten by the primary file. So any changes that you thought you made went away. So there was always a primary, you only ever interfaced with the primary. What the new update did was it now made it so it's a full synchronization. You don't have to manually back anything up. When you hit synchronize, it'll automatically do the synchronization for you. And it doesn't matter where you are, whether you're primary and secondary. You make changes to the system, it will propagate throughout the entire system. So this is a huge change to how we would handle redundancy in the past. We also now provide you a lot of information as to if you have a primary, secondary HMI, alarm and events, data logging, when we're looking at the data connection, all the diagnostics are part and built into the system. So you can now easily create a lot of diagnostic windows and then tie those into alarms as part of the system. So our alarming functionality, we have the ability of tying into the ALMAs, ALMDs that are already part of the control logic system. We now can also support the new Logix tag-based alarming in the L8s as of version 31. So those will also be a push from the controller back into the HMI, or I can do the full SE-based HMI alarming. For anybody that's dealing with legacy systems, this is the last version of FactoryTalk View SE that will support the old ancient HMI-based alarming. So for anybody that ever created that, it was an HMI that you create inside of the block, and then there was a little X that turned on the alarming. There's a knowledge base article that tells you how to convert those over. It's essentially a utility that will go and scan everything out and push it into the new alarm and events feature set. So if you have questions on that, just let me know. I can work you through how to do that. But this essentially, what ends up happening is the operator doesn't care where the data is coming from. As soon as the alarm triggers, you can have the alarm banner on the top. You can have a summary there. You can tie in those events that I was talking about. You can also leave remarks, and it's all tied into SQL. Something new also that got added into version 24 and above is the idea of extended parameters. So if you guys have dealt with in control logics or compact logics, there's this little, what we call metadata. So we were writing information to non-volatile, so it wasn't taking up memory space inside of the controller, but to an extent, there was nothing that could access the information. So what you can do now is you're writing data points directly in to the tag properties. So what this allows you to do is you can take the data properties and you see this @ symbol. So your engineering units, your minimum, your maximum amount, all the different data points that you would normally create as a UDT can now be saved as one tag with multiple metadata pieces directly tied into it. All the metadata, you're still saving it in the controller. You write it upon startup, but now it doesn't take up any memory inside of the controller. And now I have the ability of being able to dynamically grab that information from the HMI and display it and use it for my trending, my parameter passing, and tying all of those pieces in. So this is just a nice little ability of being able to kind of offload some of the overhead that you would traditionally write inside of the controller, but I can see it inside of the HMI. So yeah, you have that. For anybody that's not aware of it, we can do language switching. So you have two options. You can either do language switching at the controller level, so that you can change what the tag structure looks like, or I mean the descriptions, and bring that into the HMI. You can also do language switching at the controller level for all of the comments that you would leave. So if you guys weren't aware of that, that is a nice feature the controller has, so you can swap between English, Spanish, French, and whatever other few languages that you can think of. On the HMI, it does a very similar thing. The process library objects have already created the interface for you, so you can swap between the different languages on the process library. If not, what you can do is just in the background, what's happening is every single text string is in an Excel format. So you can export that same Excel, put it into Portuguese, English, Spanish. You just write in manually all the different changes to it, so that when you do the language switch, it's choosing the column for that specific text string. So it's a really easy way of doing it. It takes a little bit of work sometimes just to be able to do the conversions, but once you put it in there, it's saved. You don't have to worry about it, and it works on individual clients. So you can have 10 different clients, all be 10 different languages if you wanted to. And I have to remember to swap it back to English because I have no idea what it was saying. Security areas. So one of the things that this did get introduced in V11 is the ability of being able to look at different security locations. So originally, for anybody that had experience with FactoryTalk, you would set up codes, security codes A through P, and you did all your animation based on the A through P kind of codes. What you can also now do is do it based off user groups inside of FactoryTalk Security. So as you create your users and your groups, you can assign different areas and who has access to those areas, whether that's from a visualization point or who has input-output functionality. So sometimes you just want them to have read-only access versus read-write. So this is something brand new that they've added so that you can go in there and start modifying things. And then let me swap back. So to go into a little bit of what we're doing from the ISA standards and some of the pieces here. So this is a nice demo because you can run it pretty easily on your system. You don't need any hardware. It just launches on your laptop. The code is written from version 18 all the way up to, I think, 32 when it comes to Studio 5000. So the only limit is for the new library objects, you have to be at minimum version 10 for FactoryTalk View SE. So if you have that, you're good. If not, you have the older versions of it. The question about the Sparkline, so that is one big thing that we've made modifications to and how we handle analogs. So one of the big things that you'll notice is any variable that's changing is now in blue. So this is a change that we had from the original library set. So black should be static, blue is a changing variable. We provide you the global objects for each type of sensor or equipment that you'd be looking at. So the idea here is this is tracking to the live data. This should be giving you where you can set it up as an analog input. I can have multiple different analog inputs, and I can also give you different data ranges. So I don't know how well you can see it on the screen, but I can see where it's been tracking over the last maybe shift, so that I know whether or not it's been going up or down, or if I had a big offset. Any of the alarms would be tied into it. I can see this information, but when I click on it, I can now open it up and I get that little Sparkline. So as long as I leave it up, I can go away for 2 minutes, come back, and I'm not just seeing the real-time data, I'm also seeing where it's been in the last 2 minutes. So this gives you a quick little representation. You can also see if you wanted to drop this little trend window inside of just your P&ID portion of it, instead of just getting your real time, you're also seeing that little 2-minute window. So you can see quickly, do I have a large increase or decrease within the last 2 minutes? So I can know whether or not to do something. Nothing is blinking, nothing is going haywire. Essentially, the way that we're treating this is if you see blinking lights, that means there's a problem, something that your operator actually has to go in and fix. For the PIN, all you have to do is inside of the development platform, you would go into the little pop-up. Let me try to. So that same graphic that I was looking at, this is what it looks like. Everything is kind of built into it. The nice thing here is there's over 200 parameters in each one of these faceplates. The only thing that you have to do is tie it into the name. The structure is taken care of. All the dot fields inside of it, the AOI, all of that's created for you. If you use Application Code Manager, you can auto-generate all of the graphics yourself without having to touch the HMI. But inside of the display settings, you would have replace overlay on top. On top is the faceplate. There's a little button that now is a checkbox for pin button. So all that means is inside of the HMI, I can now click the top end little Windows display, hit pin, and now I can move back and forth through the different screens, and that guy stays. So it's a nice little feature set there. Inside of PID, I can see all my variables. Again, anything that's blue is a changing variable. If I have read write, you now still have your full setup. If you set your min and max inside of the numeric input, you will see the min and max. It will not allow you to deviate from that. So you can set your high range and low range inside of it. You can also see inside of this any diagnostics information that's coming from that specific block. So if I'm looking at a VFD and it's a 755 or 753, I can see the real world error code, not the hex 10103, and figuring out what that is. They'll tell you drive is not ready to start XYZ. On the configuration, we've now separated out the advanced features from the regular features. So from an operator point of view, if you don't want them to be able to go in there and make modifications into the configuration of your blocks, of your VFDs and things of that nature, you put this on a different area for the security. So they may be able to see it, but they may not be able to make any modifications to it. So you have different options there. On any of these PIDs, you can go in there and make all your changes inside of the different settings. You can set your deadbands, you can set your limits, all of that is available for you. The whole idea of the HMI is you actively want to get away from the ability of having to do any type of Studio 5000 edits. You can do everything from the HMI. So your commissioning can be done from the HMI. In the trending that I was talking about, so Trend Pro, as I mentioned, this is what the data points would look like from the standard little block that you would drop in here. This Trend Pro, I can now see dynamically kind of make changes to how I'm doing it. So I can do isolated graphing and stack them on top. All of this is done dynamically from the screen. So for anybody that's done the trending before, you know it didn't work this way. So I can also do a trace, so I can get a specific data point from one point to another and do like a little Excel spreadsheet where I can suck that out or print it out. So that is something brand new. If I had Asset Center, I would be able to tie into the alarm states, also looking at the different pieces here. I can freely choose which ones I have. From a data logging, if I wanted to grab a piece of data and move it in, it's a drag and drop. So that easily makes that, and like I said, you have historian, you have live data. You can also do the alarm and events information. And then if I wanted to do more of an ISA-based standard, I can drop this down so that it's more of a grayscale. So now I'm pulling that information without making it bright and flashy from an operator point of view. So, and then, like I said, there's an E300 that's now been added in. So that's just a simple block for your soft start. The VFD side, if I'm looking at, let's see, this one's the 755. If I go into my diagnostics, again, I can see device out of service, configuration error, everything that would normally be tied in directly to that unit that I have to go find out what that hex value was. You don't have to do any configuration on these guys. They're already tied in. And last thing that I'll mention really quick, because I know we're running out of time, especially for the folks on the phone, is if I wanted to do a client, what I used to have to do is kind of figure out, create it, do a bunch of modifications. We've now created a different window for this. So if I wanted to run a client, and this could be on any location, as long as I've created it in the past, I can just grab it from there. If I'm creating a new, I give it a name, I hit continue, and it gives me the selection on where the application is coming from. Local station, network station, distributed. And it gives me all of the information, anything that's signed in, what my initial language is going to be, and then where my HMI server is. I can also go in there and say I'm going to do multi-monitor support. So if I'm not using Thin Manager and I want to use this natively, I can do this here. I can specify what the window size is going to be. So do I want it to dynamically assign full screen to whatever monitor size is there? Or do I want to lock it down to 1920 by 1080 or something to that effect? The other really nice feature that we've been asking for years is enable auto logout. So how many times have you had to like create this little thing window in there for inactivity for 10 minutes so that it automatically logs in back to default? That is now part of the security in the client itself. So that is a nice little, again, little golf clap on stuff, something that should have been there a while back. So again, for you guys that are here, we can continue a little after this, but for guys on the phone or for you guys, are there any questions specifically? I know we've gone over time a little bit. So yeah, V11 is out. There's going to be a lot more information coming up at TechEd. So for anybody that is able to go to RA TechEd, registration is open. I think early, are we still doing early registration? Okay, so you might have to pay the full amount. Those cloud-based images that I was talking about, they are working on one that will have FactoryTalk View 11 and Asset Center V9 installed on the same one with the lab environment so that we can go through that. So I'll make sure to let everybody know once that's out. The existing labs that we have right now are from TechEd last year, so it'd be V10.
Did you say that the Asset Center V9 comes with FactoryTalk virtual purchase?
No.
It does not accept.
Yeah, FactoryTalk Asset Center would be a separate purchase than SE. And if you have a toolkit, you can go and play around with all of it, but the actual install itself is different. One of the things that we did come out with, and you guys should be aware, is as part of the Plant PX package, we have an all-in-one image that's come out. So most of you guys know that we do virtual templates. We have all the different software in it. We now have a consolidated Plat PX system that has, for less than 2,000 points of I/O, we have FactoryTalk View, SE, Asset Center, Historian, Vantage Point, all loaded on the same image. So we provide it to you as an ISO. You can install it on a physical box or virtual. So that is a nice little feature set. So we can do one of the things that we'll talk about during the next user group for that Stratus Edge box. That ZTC is almost perfect for a little consolidated Plant PX system. So a small little system, because it handles about 3 to 4 virtual images. That would take up one. So, anything online?
Yeah, one question came in. There's a color tool that you could use for V10. When will they have a working one for V11?
If that's the color palette tool, it has already been updated for V11.
That's it, all right.
Cool.
We'll go ahead and wrap it up. I know we're a few minutes over, so appreciate everybody's time. Luis, great job. And look for emails about June, as well as the on-tour stuff that we'll have in the room. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you, guys.